In February 1942, a young American ranger named Leland Young stepped off the train at Spenbridge Station in the Scottish Highlands, hefted his 36LB Bergen onto his back, chambered a round in his rifle, and began a 7M forced march to Achnacarry Castle. He had precisely 60 minutes to complete the march. Failure meant immediate RTU, return to unit, and the end of his commando career before it began. What made this moment extraordinary wasn't the punishing distance or the weight. It was that live ammunition cracked overhead as he marched. Training officers fired Bren guns 6 in above the trainee heads to simulate combat conditions. By 1946, when the last course graduated, more than 25,000 men had made this march. Some hadn't survived it. On paper, this shouldn't have worked. Traditional military theory held that elite forces required purpose-built facilities, controlled ranges with measured distances, climate-regulated barracks, and graduated training programs that minimized risk. The Germans trained their Fallschirmjäger at state-of-the-art facilities with precision equipment. The Waffen-SS selected their men at dedicated training schools like Bad Tilts, where every variable could be controlled. Standard military thinking emphasized safety margins, progressive difficulty, and the preservation of expensive training infrastructure. Yet Britain requisitioned drafty Victorian shooting lodges scattered across some of the wettest, coldest, most inaccessible terrain in Europe and produced the finest special forces of the war. The paradox deepened further. These training grounds operated for 4 years in near total secrecy, yet sat barely 100 m from major population centers. German intelligence knew British commandos existed. They'd captured enough of them to understand their capabilities. What the Abwehr never discovered, despite their extensive network of informants, was precisely where these men were trained, or how many training schools operated simultaneously. This wasn't accidental. The Highlands' apparent disadvantages, remoteness, harsh weather, primitive facilities were precisely what made the system impossible for German intelligence to penetrate. Military planners in 1940 faced an unprecedented challenge. Winston Churchill had ordered the creation of special forces to set Europe ablaze through sabotage and irregular warfare. The Special Operations Executive needed to train agents who could operate behind enemy lines. The Commandos required soldiers capable of amphibious raids. Both organizations needed absolute secrecy. Standard military installations wouldn't do. Purpose-built facilities would take years to construct and would be obvious targets for Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights. On paper, the solution seemed obvious. Requisition existing facilities in secure areas with good transport links close to established military infrastructure. Critics argued that remote Scottish locations would create logistical nightmares. How would you supply 10 separate training schools scattered across terrain without proper roads? Standard military thinking emphasized accessibility and efficiency. The reality of operational security showed something different. In May 1940, SOE requisitioned Arisaig and surrounding shooting lodges in the Moray Peninsula, approximately 150 mi northwest of Glasgow. The strategic protected area covered roughly 2,000 square miles of the wildest terrain in Britain. Access required either a single-track road through Fort William or the West Highland Railway line, both easily monitored. In December 1941, Achnacarry Castle became the Commando Basic Training Center under Lieutenant Colonel Charles Voron's command. What made this work wasn't just remoteness. The British government restricted access to much of Lochar by preventing non-residents from crossing the Caledonian Canal. The canal, completed in 1822, bisected the Great Glen and created a natural choke point. Anyone attempting to reach the training areas from the east had to cross at monitored points. From the west, the Atlantic coastline offered no practical approach. The nearest harbors were fishing villages where strangers would be immediately noticed. Ben Nevis, Britain's highest mountain at 1,345 m, dominated the southern approaches. The Moray Peninsula's single-track road wound through narrow glens where vehicle movement could be observed for miles. This seemed like an operational disadvantage to SOE planners in London. It meant endless complications, delayed communication, difficult supply lines, the challenge of moving foreign nationals to isolated locations whilst maintaining cover stories. Yet to the men training there, and to the security services responsible for protecting them, the Highlands' isolation was perfect. The very difficulty of access that made logistics complex also made German infiltration impossible. Standard intelligence doctrine in 1940 held that identifying military training facilities required three elements: concentrated troop movements, distinctive infrastructure, and observable training activities. German reconnaissance aircraft photographed British military bases regularly. The ABV maintained informant networks that reported unusual activity. What they encountered in the Highlands defeated both approaches. SOE designated its Highland training schools by number, creating a deliberate maze of facilities. SDS-21, Aris House served as headquarters for group of paramilitary training. SDS-22, Rabbana Lodge sat on a peninsula jutting into Loch Morar, accessible only by boat or a 3-mile track. SDS-23 Mabel Lodge occupied the eastern shore of Loch Morar, 10 separate facilities in total, none closer than 2 miles to its neighbor, each occupying an existing sporting lodge that from the air appeared identical to dozens of other Highland estates. On paper, this dispersion was madness. Centralized training maximizes efficiency through shared resources, standardized instruction, and economy of scale. The Germans understood this. Their training establishments concentrated expertise at locations you could identify on a map, photograph from aircraft, and deduce their purpose from observable patterns. Critics in the British military argued the Highland system wasted instructors through duplication. Yet in reality, this dispersion made the network invisible. 10 lodges scattered across 2,000 square miles generated no distinctive signature. Troop movements arrived by train at Spenbridge in groups of 30 to 40 men, indistinguishable from normal military transit. Each lodge accommodated 25 to 40 trainees, small enough that smoke from chimneys or vehicles on tracks appeared entirely consistent with a working Highland estate. When German reconnaissance flights photographed the area, they saw exactly what British planners wanted: empty wilderness punctuated by sporting lodges that had existed for decades. The training schedule reinforced this invisibility. Courses ran for 3 weeks, initially extended to 5 by 1943. Different nationalities trained at different lodges: French agents at Garramore, Czech operatives at Tray House, Norwegians at Drummond Tool Lodge. This separation served security. Agents who didn't know each other's identities couldn't compromise operations if captured. But it also fragmented the signature. A German agent who somehow identified one lodge's purpose would learn nothing about the others. What actually mattered was that the Highlands enforced security through geography rather than guards. You cannot surveil a facility you cannot approach. The remoteness that looked like a liability was deliberate asymmetric defense. German intelligence identified the general area. Captured commandos admitted they'd trained in Scotland, but never located specific facilities. Military training doctrine in 1942 emphasized graduated progression. Master basics with dummy ammunition, advance to controlled live fire on measured ranges, then apply skills in field exercises with strict safety protocols. American forces trained at purpose-built facilities like Fort Benning, where rangers were surveyed to the inch and safety officers enforced rigid protocols. Standard military thinking held that using live ammunition in uncontrolled environments was reckless. Achnacarry Castle operated differently. The Commando Basic Training Center compressed what conventional armies taught in 6 months into 6 weeks. The course began with that 7M speed march, 60 minutes with 36 lb of kit and a loaded rifle. Those who succeeded found themselves in a regime that would have horrified safety officers anywhere else in the British military. Instructors fired live rounds 6 and above trainees' heads during assault courses. Demolition training used real explosives. The culminating exercise, an opposed landing at Boneg on